Welcome to Office Hours, where we've been answering your tech-related production questions every single day since March 25th, 2020. Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia is our reader today. Alexander, what have we got?
This one's coming in from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. I want to create a serviceable touchscreen out of a 50-inch monitor for digital signage. Is there a way to do this without purchasing a smart TV? Good, better, best, please.
Courtney Gooden's going to help you out here. Courtney?
But I don't know how, I don't know if there is a good, better, best, because there's probably only one or two technologies that you can use. Smart TV is not really what you need. Smart TV just means it's connected to the internet. Um, there are aftermarket devices that you can put on using infrared. Here's one on Amazon for about $202. Here, this one, they make these available for different screen sizes. You can just choose your size. I've chosen 50 inches because you said that's what you want. It interfaces to your computer with a USB cable, and it shows up as a touch screen interface or touch panel to your to your operating system. And it uses infrared receivers and transmitters around the edge of the bezel to determine where you're touching the bezel. There was another technology called surface acoustic wave that they used to use for touch screens. But that was used mainly on glass surface monitors. I don't know how well it would work on some of the newer plastic surfaced LCD screens, but there is the infrared type. It's a 10-point touch, so it'll probably work good enough for a kiosk or something where you're just going to make menu selections and things like that. It should work fine. I don't know if it's going to do things like, two finger zooms. But
Mike, thanks for the... Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, as a substitute for mouse clicks, so that'll work for you.
I was going to say, Mike, thanks for the question. Next question.
This one is a QR code question from Ola in Kent, UK. From your experience, how do you keep your team members calm during a production, especially when everyone is getting nervous because there are issues before a live stream? I have a big event this weekend and need some tips.
Guy Cochran, you're involved in a lot of big events. What do you do?
Yeah, rehearsals. I mean, being able to actually go through it, especially if you could burn stuff in with a good 24 hours, like encoders, just let them run and let them heat up and let them bake, and especially in the actual environment that you're going to. So if you're doing a site survey at a place, maybe I always like to take a laptop with me and just run speed test and just see what kind of internet we're getting. And then if I have time, put in some kind of load on it and see what happens and make sure that all my machines are working. But as far as the crew, again, it's have a run a show so they know where they're going to be at, and then actually let it tick off things as you hit them, because sometimes if you go strict by time, then you're nailed to that specific time. But if you let it be kind of loose and it's like, okay, the person's going to present, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 6.5 minutes, and having a nice run a show or software that allows you to do that. And then again, rehearse that tech check, fax everything out, make sure it's all working. And I think once you build that muscle memory of, okay, we're going to go from here to here, it just eases everybody's mind, especially once you do have everything set up and you could do it again, 2 hours to show, and it eases everything. Then the other thing that we talk about pace with having a primary and a what does PACE stand for? The alternative,
secondary,
contingency,
C is
emergency.
Contingency. Emergency.
Yeah, so having 4 is total peace of mind. It can put in more complexity, but if you have the budget to do it, especially adding things for like power, UPS, I mean, and that's the other thing, knowing where breakers are and having the phone numbers of people on site that you could reach out to. So preferably all this is handled ahead of time. You have a nice call sheet that has the emergency numbers of who you can reach out to, and little things like on a call sheet, you'll see like nearest hospital and things like that. So all these things create a little comfort, when you know that somebody's handled these things. So a good producer that, is on the ball, especially if they've done this a lot, they have these sheets, they have these formulas that are already tried and true. So they're not guessing, they're not forgetting, because on this gig I just did in LA, the rental house didn't bring a much needed piece of equipment, and luckily I was able to work around it. But man, talk about like somebody dropping the ball, and I'm like, never ever 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 ever, because I was flying in, so I was already packing 3 cases. And so that's the thing, is like, what if you're flying in weekend and your stuff doesn't show up. So again, having contingency, it's nice to know other people in the city that you're going to, but we were setting up that day and running through tech checks, and I just had to make do with what I had. So have alternatives just in case something doesn't show up. If you have to fall back to another position that's maybe not as cool or sexy, but it's going to get the job done and get your stream out. I mean, we have fallbacks to even 720p if we're broadcasting out in 1080, and it's just like, okay, what if the internet does take a hiccup? What is our next step? What can we do?
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, Guy covered all the high points there. I agree that having a rundown and then rehearsing that rundown, especially if you're going to be rolling in videos at different sections. But then you have to be, if you're doing a live show with guest speakers, things like that, you have to be able to change the rundown at the last minute, because sometimes people don't show up. And, you know, they were supposed to give a speech. Well, now you got to find somebody else to give that speech, or you got to jump over that speech, and everybody's got to know that that segment has been removed. So having an electronic rundown at everybody's position that they can glance at, that is updated by the show caller or the technical director, is very handy to have, and eases people's minds, because they know what's coming up next and they can be prepared for it and set up for it. The other thing is your tone of voice. If you're calling the show, if you're directing the show, you gotta make friends with some air traffic controllers, because air traffic controllers have that calm voice even in emergencies. If you've ever noticed them, the communications, listen to the recordings of air traffic control. They're not panicked, you know, when, you know, guys got, oh, we've got 2 engines out, mayday, mayday, you know, and then turn right to 102, hold altitude at 1,000 feet, you know, and they're very calm and collected, and they're trained to be that way. And that type of demeanor can calm everybody down. If you're shouting into the comms, going, "Where are you?" You know, that makes everybody on edge, and it kind of increases the chances of you making more errors when they start to hear yelling over the headset.
Ronnie Housesoy.
Yeah, just to add on to what's been said already, make sure you have a clean setup. So stress is often caused by being insecure of what that cable does and where it goes. And if it hits the fan, you should be aware of everything and have a calm approach to everything. In flights, you have the saying of aviate, navigate, and communicate, and to some extent the pace is also about that. But making sure that you know everything beforehand, staying very calm during the whole production, and especially when something goes wrong, is really important. And be overstaffed. So you always need to have extra staffing. You should not plan to have just the exact number of people to fill the roles and be like 90 to 100%, because when something happens, you need to have some overhead amongst your people and your crew, and that causes everything to go better. And I would just say at the end, have discussions about what went wrong afterwards, as Mickey said. That is really important. Do not start to discuss what's going wrong and what should be done to prevent it, because that could add uncertainty and maybe a little bit be stressful for some of the team members. And then they, instead of thinking of what they are supposed to be doing based on their roles, they are start thinking of, oh, what if this happens? So that should be kind of focused on, and of course, training, and prepare well, and everything will work out.
Nice question. Thank you. Hey, don't forget, we're taking your questions. You can ask questions, chat about questions, and vote on them in Mukana. That's our live Q&A system. It's very active during this. In fact, I was just reading through alternate suggestions, Mickey's comments, and others in the chat for this. So it really is a great add-on to the show if you can watch it live while you're listening. We'll send you an email once you go to officehours.global/join. That's kind of how you get into the process. And once you complete that, you can get into the system, ask additional questions, vote on, and discuss the show's questions in real time. That's officehours.global/join. All right, next question.
This question is coming from me. Has anyone been able to force original sound on using the Windows IT installer? I've used the variables provided in the documentation and it still defaults to off when I start a meeting. I also can't get it to disable echo cancellation.
Hopefully, Courtney Gooden, one of our PC system gurus, is going to help you out here. Courtney, dive in.
IT installer, are you talking about a remote system, Windows system, or are you talking about on hardware?
So Zoom has a special installer app called the Zoom IT installer for admins. And what that basically does, it's the Zoom client, but you can, through the command line, you can enable specific settings and that you want to force the user to have without them being able to change it. So for example, if you wanted to have high fidelity audio and original sound turned on at all times, you can install the client through the command line with those variables, and then they won't be able to change it. It's just not working as expected in my case.
Well, one thing you might look into is, and this affects both the IT installer and regular user interface. If your Windows machine that you're installing this on or running Zoom on has audio enhancements, these are the person who, or the company who made the machine, HP or whatever, has a lot of times custom audio enhancements, which let you turn on things like echo and room size and special audio effects and low frequency bass enhancement. And if you turn off those things, a lot of times those things, the audio driver interferes with automatic settings from Zoom. So go into the advanced menu. I don't know where it would be on the IT, but on the user interface, under advanced, there's these three settings here where you turn off Windows audio enhancements. Mine's set to auto, that will detect them and use them or not use them, but you can set them to off. And also this audio device drivers, processing by audio device drivers, try and turn that off, because sometimes that audio processing gets in the way of echo cancellation and or music, audio for musicians settings.
Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. What's new in ATEM software control version 9.8.1?
Ronnie Holshoi is going to help us out. Ronnie?
Well, it's minor changes. I think they are digging a little bit deeper into the maybe enhancement or code or that improves the functionality for the ATEM macro camera panel. And we discussed it earlier today. The problem is that Blackmagic doesn't necessarily list everything they've done to an update. We would love to see an update telling us to upgrade this and this unit. So if it's also include a firmware update, would be nice to see in these update files or information, so that we can decide if we're going to do some updates. There have been a lot of frustration about that earlier. And as I can see, most of these small changes are very, very minor and could probably just impact the users of the micro camera panel, as far as I can see.
Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. What is your most effective method for systematically troubleshooting a complex signal chain problem when under pressure? How do you avoid just randomly changing settings?
Courtney, start us off here.
Well, this can get complex. In the audio signal chain, which is usually, going from source to destination, you might have several points along that chain where you can pop in and monitor your audio signal at each point, at each step throughout the chain. There are two different methods of doing this. One of the easiest methods is start at the source and work your way down the chain. Do I have a good sounding audio here? Yes. Go next step down through the chain. After each piece of equipment or each thing that is processing that audio through the chain, and check your signal at each point until you get to the end. And at some point you'll find the audio signal disappears or becomes distorted. And then you go back one. And so that the thing that's in between those 2 points is where your problem is with your signal chain. Another way to do that is to divide and conquer. In other words, it's a little faster if you divide, if you have, let's say you have 8 points where your audio signal is being processed, you go halfway down, you go to the 4th point in and you check the audio there rather than starting at the very beginning. And if it sounds good there, you've already eliminated 4 of the points. So then you just work your way, then you divide the remaining signal test points in half, and you go to that point. And each time you're removing half of the remaining area. So it's a little faster process for troubleshooting if you divide and conquer, divide the number of test points that you have in half, and then go in half again and half again. And you'll come to determine where the problem is a little bit faster than working your way through a complex chain from beginning to end.
Ronnie Hofsaway?
Yeah, and it also depends a little bit about what type of signal chain we are. There are network, there are DMX for light control, there are ArtNet, which is pure digital, and so there is a lot of different types. But talking about audio, one of the super tools we have been using lately is the Sound Bullet from Sonect, which is actually just doing exactly what Courtney was talking about. This has a built-in speaker, and if we are following, let's say, a microphone from a vocalist, which is not appearing where it should be in the PA or whatever, I can just insert this and listen to the signal with this built-in speaker. It's really, really fast to find faults, and it also have, of course, a signal generator, which is generating both white noise, pink noise, and the sinus 1 kilohertz tone, and it also has a built-in cable checker for XLR cable. So choosing the right tool for what type of signal you are testing or checking is also important. So this is with me everywhere.
Totally agree with both of those things. I will say also that you learn after a period of time, okay, that problem sounds like it's an audio problem. That problem looks like it's a video problem. That problem seems to me to be a computer processing problem, and maybe the issue is not with either the signals, but somehow the way that the system is processing it. And you kind of get, after a while in this business, you kind of go, oh, okay, that's a 60 cycle hum. That's purely audio. Let me just go check everything in the audio chain. Or that clicking sounds to me like maybe there's a sample rate problem. You just get a feeling. The kind of problem tells you a little bit about where to look. And sometimes, oh, that's probably a dropped frame. That's going to be video. You just have to, the more you do it, the better you get at figuring out which system to look at to use these techniques and tools that everybody's been talking about here. I'm a big divide and conquer guy myself. That's the first place I go up once I decide where the problem probably lives. Next question.
This one is from Zach Jeffers in Spokane, Washington. When working with LED walls, what's the best method to get the wall to be camera shutter friendly? Since the wall's brightness is driven by its refresh rate, is there any formulas or tools to get these in sync without compromising brightness?
Guy Cochran, what do you think?
Yeah, you're going to want a good camera that actually has the tools inside. I wind up having to do this a lot with the Canon CRN 500s. These are PTZ cameras that are at the top end, and also the UE150. So if we look at the UE150 manual here, we can see that there's step, synchro, ELC for the shutter control. And if you go to the one that's called synchro, then you could go into these other steps that are they're not just the hard 160, 1/100th, 120. You could actually dial in fractions, and you start to get into these numbers that you'll watch the rolling bar or whatever it is that's pulsing will start to go away. So you're just sitting there with the controls and just dialing it in and watching. And for people that don't know about this, it's a godsend when somebody that knows what they're doing steps in and goes, I can cure that. And that's what happened on one of these shows recently, where the guy was just completely frustrated. And I came in on day 2 and I was just like, you let that fly yesterday on the show. And they just didn't know to go into the synchro settings and dial it in. But people that have been doing this for a long time know how to use these tools because they've read the manual or they've seen this before and they can polish things up. And so the day before's was it was right behind the speaker too, and it was very apparent because it was a big rolling bar. You can try to get away with going down even lower to like 1/30th, but yeah, you're going to blow out your brightness. And if your camera is like a PTZ optics, it doesn't have these finite controls. You could try going below 1/60th if you're outputting it at 2997. It's just a matter of going below the threshold, and sometimes you can get away with it. But yeah, it's going to make your motion appear a little more dreamy, like it'll have some blur behind it. But if that's what's worse, at that point, it's a compromise between having to stop down on your iris because now it's too bright. So now you're maybe shooting at f11, and now that can create another issue with moire and blah, blah, blah. But the important thing is to get the right camera and use the right tools.
Courtney Gooden?
Yeah, that's right. And another thing you might want to look at is if the video wall has a means of locking its refresh rate. And a lot of times they'll adjust brightness by doing pulse width modulation, so that it'll be running at a certain refresh rate, but they're varying the amount of time each LED is lit up at a time, so they vary the width of that on cycle. That can create, some problems and artifacts with the shutter on cameras. It depends on whether your camera also is a global shutter or a rolling shutter. It will create different types of artifacts. A global shutter sometimes can create just breathing. And most video walls these days have a pretty high refresh rate of in the thousands of frames per second and thousandths of a second. That's not the frame rate, but that's the refresh rate. That's how fast the LEDs are turned on and off and scanned to create that image. And like was said by Guy, the going in a longer exposure time or a higher global shutter angle, like 360 degrees, will eliminate a lot of those artifacts. It's when you get into the very short exposure times or narrow shutter angles that you're going to get a lot more artifacts, or likely to have a lot more artifacts. But as he said, motion can become a little blurry, and you may of course have to stop down because you're lengthening your exposure time. Everything's going to be a lot brighter. You may have to adjust your lighting on your people that are standing in front of that video screen to balance the image of the person and the video screen.
Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. For managers of small production teams, what are the most effective strategies for fostering a culture of continuous learning? How do you ensure your team stays current with rapid tech changes?
Alexander Knight.
I find this thing, I don't manage large teams, but I find it really difficult, unless you really have the drive and the passion to learn new things. It's hard to really get people interested if they're not already interested. So starting with hiring the right people that kind of align with like your own passions would be a good start. But I think there are things that organizations can do. Like one company I worked at would would pay you to do continuous education. So if if something was beneficial to the company and beneficial to you, you could take those business courses and they would pay for that. So I think doing stuff like that. I think also if you're a manager, probably setting some kind of example, because I think it translates well if people can see you constantly staying up to date on technology, chasing the, all that stuff, constantly learning. I think that is also helpful, but you got to really find the right people, because it's hard to really force people to learn stuff if they don't really want to go after it themselves.
Courtney Gooden?
Yeah, this is kind of a touchy political situation sometimes, because you get into a situation, you have a department head, let's say, that you're working under. Department heads never want to hear anyone that's working under them that's smarter than they are. So if you are really well educated, you're up on all the latest technologies and stuff, and the person that you're working for is kind of stuck in a decade ago technology, you don't want to show them up on the set, because that's the fastest way to get fired or never hired again. So you got to be careful about hiring, and this goes for people that are heads of departments. You don't want to hire a lot of hot shots that are a lot smarter than you because they'll make you look bad. And so it's kind of a political situation. It's best to educate everybody, not mention anything that relates to the production you're doing, but you might have a conversation with your crew and say, hey, did you see that new tech, that new tech that just came out, that new camera that just came out? Man, it's amazing. And bring it up casually, just to test to see what the level of knowledge and how up to date most of your crew members are, and try and keep them up to date, and be the leader in technology. But if you lag behind and you have young whippersnappers that come up that know better and faster ways to do things, it can be a little bit touchy politically.
Guy Cochran, your thoughts?
Yeah, have a North Star, have a mission and put it up on the wall and let people know where you're going, and hire for attitude, hire for the people that you want, you could see that are learners. And you can do things like the DISC test, and there's other tests where you can see what kind of personality somebody is, and you don't want to force somebody into a role that they're not meant for. There are people that they're passionate about technology, and so make sure that they're in the right role. I found that giving them mentors or mentoring themselves and having a weekly cadence where you're checking in and saying, hey, last week we spoke about X. Did you make any progress on learning about LinkedIn learning, or going to that Robert Half event, or any of these other regular learnings, where you can actually go in there and see, did they take the NDI certification test? Did they take the Dante test? And so having these goals, and it all depends on the position, obviously if it's somebody at Microsoft and they got to learn something about C++ or whatever they learn over there. I mean, you got to make sure that the role is the mission is aligned with whatever steps that are needed to achieve those goals. But yeah, having a cadence, having mentors, having check-ins, those are the types of things that will help in this endeavor.
All good suggestions. I would just say, if you're hiring bright go-getters, don't let them get bored. I used to occasionally make work projects. I'd find something that was interesting and say, hey, Tom, take a look at this thing. This is interesting. Can you kick the tires a little bit and come back and let's talk about it? So I was constantly just challenging them, because if they get bored, they get gone. That's what the best people do. They do not want to hang around someplace where they're just treading water. Don't forget, we have special shows that are coming up, and tonight is Thursday. That means The Rundown with David Paskin is on. He hosts a panel that takes a deep dive into the why behind the latest tech. And if you think that that's the only kind of thing happening in office hours, it's really not. There's a lot of things going on. For example, just today or tonight after the show, there's a special shows council meeting. Oliver Breidenbach is going to do a Mimo Live workshop. There's just all sorts of things happening in the office hours ecosystem. Pretty much every night of the week, there's some sort of meeting or gathering of people. It's one of the things that makes us such a fun place to hang out. So if you want to get involved with those things, feel free. Just head for the website and follow the breadcrumbs. Next question.
Jeff Valey in Henderson, Texas is asking, the panel was helpful with lens suggestions on Monday. However, it was void of a camera recommendation. Which camera and zoom lens would you recommend for an 18x14 green screen studio filming keynote speeches? Autofocus required.
Guy Cochran's going to start us out. Guy?
Yeah, I thought we did recommend the Sony FR7 on this. I'd have to rewind the tape, but I remember distinctly talking about the FR7's capabilities as far as the autofocus. It's super strong, where you can get a touch screen and you can just touch where you want it to focus. And you could say, now with the latest 3.0 update, you could even say, do I want two people? Do I want torso? Do I want full body? And it'll keep track of those people as they go around. If you don't want the PTZ functionality and to spend the $11,000 and get the stock lens, the little brother to this is the FX6, which is the same sensor. So you're at about not quite half the price. And then there's the FX3, FX4 in that lineup if you want to stay in the Sony world. The other camera, if you're looking for recommendations, I was just on a shoot where they had the C400, and the autofocus since the C500 Mark II has gotten remarkably better. And there's a lot of different features in that you could manually set in there for it to keep track of autofocus. And I do like using prime lenses if possible, and steering inside of the 4K, 6K, 8K, because you just have all this resolution that you can play with tack sharp. Because anytime you get into a lens, it's a zoom lens, it's going to get a little bit sharp, a little bit softer. So if you want to maintain really killer sharpness, especially for green screen stuff, then I would try to go to a prime and then zoom around. So if you measure it out, like let's say, for instance, you have that number of the room 18 by 14, and you know how you want a torso shot, that might be a 50 millimeter. So there might be some playing around with the millimeter of a prime that you need to get, whether it be an 85. And so you could do that with a lens you might already have. You might have a 24-70 already and slap it on a full frame camera and go, okay, we definitely want something beyond 70, like we want the 85. And so preferably, you just have a local camera store where you can just go walk in and try this stuff. But if you have to just buy and return, then just buy an 85 millimeter or rent one and give it a roll and see how it works for you. But wish you luck.
Ronnie Hopsoy?
Yeah, this is a difficult question. Of course, Sony cameras have impeccable autofocus. You don't necessarily need a lens that is really, really low on f-stop. You need a certain sharpness, both from the back of your head until a little bit in front of your nose. So to make sure that everything is in focus and easily keyed out. One thing that is more important is the 422 versus the 444 compression, where it's kind of difficult to key out professionally a 422 signal because of the compression and the less information in the signal. So getting a professional camera with 444 is of course preferred. If there's a budget controlling this, and you need to be able to control your budget in various ways. There are some ways to alleviate that. One thing I've done before is to just have the camera sit vertically, 90 degrees vertically. So you actually just shoot in portrait mode instead of landscape mode. That way you get around 80% more pixel resolution. And if this is a recording, you have more pixels to work with, even if those are in 422. And 10-bit versus 8-bit is also a big discussion in this. And of course, the lenses you should use is lenses that are providing you with a normal picture, like for a portrait or a person talking close up, like 50 millimeters equivalent for 35 millimeters would be great. If you're going to zoom in a little bit, maybe 85 to 90 millimeters would be kind of good. And this is, it's all up to you, but budgets is always something you have to take into calculations.
Alexander Knight.
Yeah, I listened to that show, and I remember one of the lens choices, which I agreed with, which is 24 to 70 is a good focal range, like an f.28. And I believe Alex mentioned that even a smaller sensor, like a Micro Four Thirds, which would bring your budget down considerably, would work just fine with this green screen. In fact, I actually recommend the new Panasonic Lumix GH7. This is how much it costs since you're in the United States. This is just for the body. So just under $2,000, and you get a nice 24 to 70 lens on it. And the great thing about these new Panasonics is it has their new autofocus system, which it works incredibly well. If you look at some of the reviews online on YouTube, you can see real world examples of how good their new autofocus system is. It'll record at 4K 60, and it'll even give you 422 10-bit unlimited recording, and that is even directly out of the HDMI port, which, by the way, the HDMI port is full-sized. It's not that awful micro HDMI where you have to get adapters for. So I would seriously look at something like that GH7, and Panasonic also has released a new digital hot shoe accessory that sits on top as well, that now does 32-bit float recording and has balanced XLR inputs.
Next question.
This one is from Zach Jeffers in Spokane, Washington. When working either in the office or on the road, what is your go-to seating for behind the mixer switcher for long-running shows?
Courtney Gooden, you've been doing this a while. What's your best seating options?
Well, if you're in a permanent situation where it's always the same and you own the venue, an Aero chair is always a good choice with a good lumbar support. I'm in a Lazy Boy right now, a comfortable office chair that's adjustable in angle and tension. That's good. But now when I'm on the road, I have a problem. I've got some some fused discs in my lower spine, so I need to be able to lean back every now and then to take pressure off the spine. And when traveling with a folding chair, like a folding camp chair or something, I always travel with the chair because, you get to a location, I don't want to be standing for 3 hours, and you don't know if they're going to have chairs available, or if they're going to be comfortable, or if they're going to be those hard plastic, banquet chairs. You don't want to be sitting in one of those for 4 hours in a row. So what I found is these camp chairs from GCI Outdoor Freestyle Rocker. Now this is a rocking chair, but it has a square bottom on it, and it has these pneumatic rockers back here. So you lean back, and it's hinged right there, so it can rock back confidently without the fear of falling over. And it is great for taking the weight off my spine, and to relax, I can just lean back in that chair, and it accommodates people of a variety of weights. So look for the GCI Outdoor Rocker, and it folds flat. It's kind of heavy for a portable camp chair because it's made out of tubular steel instead of aluminum, but it's very sturdy and very comfortable, and lets you lean back.
We've actually talked about chairs a lot on this show, and I don't think there's a single purchase that I am more pleased with than the fact that, well, it wasn't actually a purchase, it was a gift. My brother-in-law, back when I was in my 30s, I think, hit a really good year, and for Christmas that year, he gave me a steel case Leap chair. Now, that chair at the time, this is many years ago, was, I think, $1,200 or $1,400, and I thought, that's ridiculous, but I accepted the gift, and I'm still sitting in that chair to this day. So I've gotten 45, 50 years out of this chair. It's been solid as a rock, and I think the per-use cost of this is probably the smallest of anything I own in terms of professional equipment. So truly, if you have the resources and can find the chair that works best for you, there's no better money you will spend, because all of us in this industry spend a lot of time in front of screens and things like that. And if you're working 6-7 hours a day, as I sometimes do on edits, a good chair is worth its weight, not in gold, in platinum, in unobtainium. That's my 2 cents. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. What test signal generators do you use in the field and in permanent installs?
Let's start with Guy Cochran. Guy?
Yeah, it depends on how crazy you want to go, because the big boys are going to use Fabrixes and digital forecasts. They're in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. So if you can afford that, then that's the tool to pack around and carry with you. If you're just on the cheap and want to get something out, the Swiss Army knife that a lot of us carry around is the MD HX. And one of the things that I learned from Grant on this show, and this is why I'm thankful for this community, is that you can look in the manual, and if there's no carrier, no signal, you can choose black, green, red, yellow, blue, magenta. And this is helpful if you have a bunch of these and you have like some DSMs downstage and you're trying to figure out which is which. You could just set each decimator to a different color, and then you could figure out which signal's which because it's outputting that color. The other thing that I'll use that's also on the cheap is this software in the NDI world, which you could then convert to SDI, but it's called NDI Signal Generator. And with this, you have different bars and tone. You have even UHD outputs in 16-bit NDI colors. There's different sizes and different, you could do progressive or interlaced. You could even add sound, and then you could even load your own animations. There's a bouncing counting clock, a bouncing line. So if I'm in the NDI world, I like just using this because it's free. So I like free.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, I'm going to second the decimator, but I'm going to pick a different one instead of the MDHX, is the MD Cross, which is one step up. It's about $100 more than the MDHX. It does everything the MDHX does. So you have SDI in and out, and you have HDMI in and outs, plus you have test pattern generators. It has a whole series of test patterns that you can generate with the MD Cross that are great for testing, and it also generates a tone that can go out over the test signal generator, so you can test your audio and your video in a variety, plugge and color bars and HD color bars and chip charts and all kinds of tests that you can output from that MD Cross. About $100 more expensive, but a great tool to throw in your backpack to have. It's not going to be a great high-end Tektronix signal generator and test generator, but in a pinch, it'll give you good test signals that you can blow through the signal chain and look at your monitors, etc.
Ronnie Hofsoy.
Yeah, I'm just going with an honorable mention from Altica, which is called Cards Online. They also have a downloadable app that you can use to create different types of signals. You can choose between bars and grids and ramps, and you have all these types, and you even have a sync generator, which is kind of cool. And yeah, it's free and kind of nice to just have as a link in your toolbox.
Hey, don't forget, if you have questions you want to put into the show queue any day, you can do that quickly by just typing in askofficehours.global. I'll throw up the QR code here. That's askofficehours.global. If you shoot the QR code here into your phone or something like that, it'll take you directly to it. Or obviously, if you type in officehours.global, askofficehours.global, excuse me, into a web browser, it'll take you kind of into the quick system, and then you can put your questions in. Next question.
Rajan Shaundale in Los Angeles is asking, do you have any high-level AI daily uses in your production work?
In my case, I don't even know, and I'll tell you why I say that. There is so much AI, utility AI, and I'm a great believer in what Michael Cioni was talking about on one of our shows where he was a guest about the difference between utility AI and generative AI. Generative gets a lot of the headlines because it's kind of trying to make stuff up creatively. But utility AI, the kind of stuff that finishes your sentences for you when you're typing in Microsoft Word and stuff like that, I don't think there's any of us who don't, without even knowing it, benefit from a lot of that utility AI stuff. I know I'm in that category. So constantly when I'm writing scripts, constantly when I'm preparing graphics and things like that, little AI assistants seem to be popping up in my world more and more, depending on what website I'm on or what tool I'm using, and it just helps make me more efficient. When it comes to moving over to generative, I am much more careful about my uses. I do not do a ton of that, only for me, because I want to continue to write in my voice. I appreciate what things like ChatGPT does in terms of taking a piece of copy and making it better. But for me, because I've been writing for so long, it makes it better, but it makes it generic. And I think one of the skill sets that I think really, really good writers, and I don't claim to be that at all, but I'm just saying, really, really good writers write uniquely, and you can hear their voice come through their copy. So every time it seems to me that I'm going to drop back to generative writing of some kind, I'm adopting its voice. It's clear, maybe clearer than what I wrote, but it's not me. And that's just a personal little fetish, if you will, of mine. I want to continue to seem like and sound like me so that people, when they want what I do, come to me and not just use the auto tool. I could prove to be entirely stupid by taking this approach, but that's where I'm thinking right these days. So, Raj, I hope you find a good solution for more and more AI tools, because, boy, when they do a good job for you, they really do a good job, and they help you be much more efficient, much quicker. Let's go ahead and dive to our next question.
This one's coming in from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Is the Neumann TLM 103 still a top choice for pro voiceover work, or have mics like the Rode NT1 5th Gen caught up in quality?
Alexander Knight, start us off.
The Rode NT1, they're pretty good mics. There are better sounding mics. The things with microphones is that it's entirely subjective, and spending more money on a microphone doesn't necessarily mean that microphone is going to sound the best on your voice, and you won't really know until you try a bunch of microphones and settle on one that you find you like. So you really do have to try them. Certainly the TLM 103 is a pretty good microphone. It is a choice, and I'll just give you a few other options here as well, depending on budget. So starting on the high end too, of course, the venerable Neumann U87, which is a much more expensive choice, but also a staple in any kind of voiceover booth. And then, of course, you'll also find many studios have the AKG C414 XLS, which is another popular one that a lot of people have both at home in the studio. For entry level these days, I'll show you a couple of different options that have become really, really good in my opinion. The Mojave MA50 to me is a great entry level sounding microphone for the money, $500 US. I think is an alternative to the TLM 103. And actually, in fact, there's a bit of a story behind this. Mojave made this microphone because David Royer hates the way a Neumann TLM 103 sounds, and he was hell-bent on manufacturing a microphone that would sound as good or better at a lower price point. And I think they've done it with the MA50. For those with larger budgets, I think the MA201 is a really great microphone. This is kind of Mojave's take on a Neumann U87. This is starting to quickly become my favorite microphone, and I may even switch my AKG C414 for this one. This is a Shure KSM32, which it's a bit of a sleeper condenser microphone from Shure, because you don't see people using this microphone as much, but actually, in fact, the tonal quality reminds me a lot of a Neumann U87, and very few people are able to get that kind of sound out of a microphone that have tried to clone that mic. But this KSM32 is an incredible microphone for $719 US. And this is another option, which I know a lot of voiceover people like the Sennheiser 416 shotgun mic. Personally, I think the MKH50 sounds a little bit better. For $1,500 US. It is a small diaphragm condenser. Oftentimes you see these mics being used as a boom mic, so they're usually out of frame and you don't actually see them in the shot, but man, that is a fantastic sounding microphone. So you certainly have a lot of options, Paul.
Courtney Gooden?
Yeah, it depends. Like Alexander just said, it's really subjective. It depends on A, your voice, B, how you want to sound, and see how much you want to spend. And there are a lot of great choices, as he just went through a lot of them. Neumann has a great thing on their website. If you go to their website, they have this little chooser over here. So you look for your application, do you want to do spoken voice recording versus live sound? Now you go live sound, you get different microphones completely. But if you're talking about voiceover recording, there's your TLM 103. But if you have a lot of money and you like that vintage sound, you can go to the tube type mics, the M104, the 149, and then here's the U67, and of course the variable U87 down there if you have lots of money, deep pockets. But I've kind of partial to cheaper things. So for a budget minded, I think the Stellar X2, which is the microphone I'm speaking to now on, is quite good. And look at that. On a Prime Day deal, they're $117.50. It comes with a shock mount and even a little carrying case to carry it around in. So it's you get all that for $117. And I think it sounds great because it's modeled. They make it, I think it's in Irvine, California. And they have high quality components, and they tune it to sound like a U87 or U67. So it kind of has that Neumann sound for a budget price. So punches way above its price.
So we could talk for hours on this, and anybody who's been in the voiceover game, and I've been in it for 50 years now plus, will endlessly have these conversations, and they're great. I will tell you that in the last few years, what has become apparent to me is that the microphone matters, but not as much as the performance. And so I would ask you, if you're trying to figure out what the microphone is, I would ask you two things. Number one, what can you afford? Because there is a huge price difference between the big Sonys at $3,500, $4,500 and some of these $40 or $50 microphones. And to me, it depends on your talent. And I am putting that talent with a small t. What I'm saying is, have you trained your voice? Have you figured out what your voice is like? Can you perform correctly? If you can do those, if you can't do those things, a Neumann M149 is not going to do a darn thing for you, because it's just going to do a perfect capture of a lousy performance. As you become better, as your voice gets stronger, as your performance skills get stronger, as you can create characters and know when they need to be whispering and when they need to be shouting, and how to work your microphone to get a good recording of both of those states of performance, then mic's quality, the quality of your microphone, its sensitivity, its rejection of being overdriven and things like that can make a difference. But if you're just a newbie and you're sitting there talking at the same level all day long, or doing what I'm doing right now, I really don't need a TLM 103 to do what I do on this show. I need it for the books, the audiobooks that I do, because there my performance is varied all over the place. I'm a robot in this chapter, and I'm a tiny, tiny mouse in the next chapter. And I need a mic that has an incredibly low self-noise and is just good enough to make sure that I can perform like that. When I change mics also, I change my performance. If I'm working with an overhead boom, I'll start out with my normal announcer voice, and then I'll see if I have to vary it to get to some place that works better for the recording for that mic. So I guess what I'm saying is that the mic matters, but the mic isn't the primary thing. It's whether or not you and the mic get along really well over the course of time. And I've been through probably 50 mics, because in the beginning of my career, engineers were putting mics in front of me and they all worked. All my commercials got on the air and they all sold the products. And one mic didn't make any real difference over the other. As I've gotten longer in my career, I find that I can work differently with different mics depending on what's sitting in front of me and what I need to get accomplished in the performance that day. Alexander Knight finishes up.
I agree with that. The performance definitely matters, but I do have to say, unfortunately, if you're not blessed with a really nice voice, the microphone and the preamp quality that combination that you pick does start to really, it takes the edge off. Bill, because not everyone has a nice voice like you have, right? So, if you kind of sound like this, it doesn't really matter at that point. But the microphone, I do find for some people to have nasally voices, the preamp and the microphone can really take the edge off too. So it all matters.
Yeah, it's one of those things like cooking. What do you start with? If the chicken breast is already salting, adding salt is not a good idea. If it's not salty, maybe adding some salt is a good idea, but you have to understand what you're starting with, how you're going to prepare it, and what you're going to serve in the end, and what the market wants. All three of those things kind of fit in to me. That's my way of thinking. Next question.
Robert Linkram in Belmont Shore, California. I will be needing to buy a wireless XLR system. What frequency bands of these three work well? Band number A equals 470 to 542 megahertz. Band B 536 to 608 megahertz. Band C plus 941 to 960 megahertz.
Let's go with Guy Cochran, who will expand on it depends.
Yeah, why limit yourself? I mean, there's other bands besides those. So if you want to jump over to the Sennheiser frequency finder, you could Google it and you could type in your city and you could see who's broadcasting in those ranges and at what power. So this would be first stop. The other one, if you know people in the area that are professional sound mixers, they know. They all talk. And if you're in a group like the Freelance Sound Mixers group on Facebook, there's 6,000 people in there. I'm positive there's somebody in there that would be able to answer this question as to which one to get. But I'd probably also be exploring WYSICOM, the Sound Devices A20 line, so that you're opening up even more bands. And the other thing to think about is using an RF Explorer. It's a cheap device that you can pick up for a couple $100 and go to the venue where you'll be at and let it scan and see what's dominating in that area, where, because there's nothing worse than arriving at a venue and everything's just white out. It's just, you see everything maxed out. But even in that arena, you can get things like this thing called the bow tie. So depending on your system, you could throw on like a Deity or a Betso. And basically what these can do is it could say only, like, ignore everything else, but only stay in the 500 range and give me that 500. And so you could, if somebody's overpowering you, you could really just knock it out. So places like NAB, where there's a lot of RF going on, these would be almost a given. You just got to have one if you're going to do this and want to capture the ultimate best sound. The other thing is just, can a cable work, or can you get that receiver closer to the transmitter and then use lower power? I mean, it saves batteries if you're using lower power anyway, but it's one of those things where talk to the people that do this stuff in that area, and they'll give you the best recommendations.
Alexander Knight.
You got to be really careful with this stuff. I'm going to say something that's going to come off really rough, and it'll be a hard pill to swallow. But if you can't afford good wireless, then you probably shouldn't have it. I will say, with a small caveat, companies like Shure, for example, they make these budget lines of wireless products, like their BLX series that start about $400, I think, $400 to $500. And they have a lot of compromises in that price point. They still are in the UHF band, but they are not as robust in terms of wireless reliability, and they have limited frequency bands available. They all have, like you said, Robert, here, they have different SKUs here with different frequency bands. I would start by looking at Shure's wireless frequency finder. You can put in the city. This is only for the US, but you can put in the city, and then you can put in the wireless line that you're interested in, and it'll give you an idea of the frequency bands that will work correctly. I will tell you that for me, as someone that runs a very, very busy PA rental house that rents wireless stuff, we slowly got rid of all of our lower end entry level stuff. We actually shockingly used to rent a lot of 2.4 gigahertz stuff, which was awful. I sold all that stuff, and then we had our BLX lines, got rid of all that. So I find that for like the baseline for what would make me comfortable for any kind of wireless would be the SLX-D line from Shure. Now, believe it or not, some cities will have so many RF problems that even an SLX will not work reliably. Like if you go into downtown Chicago, it can be really tough to make even an SLX-D system work. You may need to go up to ULX or QLX. So talking to other people in that industry is always a good idea. But I would start with the Shure Wireless Frequency Finder and invest. And if you can't afford it, if it matters to you, maybe just go to a rental house and rent something that is going to be rock solid. Don't buy it. Don't invest in it. Don't buy cheap wireless. It's just not worth it. You will pay for it in the end if you make the wrong decision there.
Ronnie Hossoy.
Yeah, and there are several tools that can help you on your voyage to better wireless. And one of those are something called Soundbase. And I just looked up the Belmont Shore. And there are actually actual scans done in this area just a few weeks back. 6th of June at 10:07 p.m. And this is done outside nearby. So this is typically what we are looking for in the frequency chart. We are looking at available TV stations, which will provide kind of problem-free, in theory, connections between your wireless devices. And this is the scan. And I've just had a short look at the frequencies that you are talking about. The bands A and B seem to me to be the most relevant ones. Both of those bands have approximately 2 entire TV channels available of bandwidth. So just create an account at Soundbase and choose your location, and you can take a deeper look at this yourself. Soundbase is a really cool thing, and you can of course do your own scan as suggested.
Courtney, you have a quick comment?
Yeah, just one comment. All the suggestions have been great. Use a tool to find out what's going to be in that neighborhood that's emitting RF to interfere with you. But just a good rule of thumb to remember, the lower the frequency or the longer the wavelength, the more penetration it has. So if you're going to be using wireless mics through walls, things like that, inside houses, remember lower frequencies push through walls better than higher frequencies. So just remember that little rule of thumb too. But the most consideration is to find out if somebody else is transmitting on that frequency. So the scanners are crucial in determining which band you're going to be in.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois, USA. Question for Guy. Have you discovered anything new with the Canon Pick? Unwrapping mine now.
Ooh, what is the Canon Pick, Guy?
It's a little camera that looks like this. It's a
Aw, how
tiny
cute.
PTZ camera. Yeah. So I got turned on to this by Carl Asmussen, and he bought 4 of them. He's a professional photographer, but he uses these to supplement his photos. And what it does is a little AI camera that uses the same technology as some of the higher end Canon CRN 300 and 500. So that technology originated here like 4 years ago. And if you put the firmware update on it, which I highly recommend if you've got one, Kyle, that should be step 1. What I like about it is the app is I could put it somewhere. Say I'm doing like a trade show and I want to keep an eye on things. I could be behind the curtain or something and I could see what's going on with a $199 app, a $199 camera with the app. Now there is a wireless Wi-Fi functionality that would give you full screen, full resolution, but it hasn't been updated since 2021, and I haven't found it to work very well on my old PC that I hooked it up to. I think if I hook it up to a more modern PC, maybe I'll get better frame rates, but I'm okay with just seeing the on-screen display in the app because I could do screen sharing to like an Apple TV or something like that, and I could see what's going on. But I did get some cool shots of my grandkids. Yes, I have grandkids. I just set it up in the kitchen and it just cruises around and it makes little sounds. It takes pictures of them. So some of those can be priceless moments. So it depends on what you want to get out of it, photos or videos. But for $199, this thing was originally $499. They're on sale now at Amazon and B&H and places like that. And if you get one, make sure to get the one with the package with the free memory card and the free charger. But for $199, they're a lot of fun.
You're old enough to have grandkids? I'm astonished. So keep doing what you're doing. Thank you all for paying attention today and for watching the show, particularly to our producers, those of you who ask questions and put them in. You drive the show, and without you, we don't have a show. Simple as that. To the panelists who come and freely give away their expertise every single day. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to the back-end crew who are the unsung heroes of putting this show on the air every single day. Our gratitude and thanks to you as well. The Talak Traversal today, if you were to go around and try to get these answers from the people who asked these questions and connect them, you would travel 25,000 miles. That's 41,000 kilometers, 200 million bananas for scale. Don't forget, tonight is the rundown, and there are multiple things happening right after the show for the internal crew. We'll see you all tomorrow.
All right, I'm going to jump right into. Everybody, join us in the if you can
Workshop.
join us in the Memo Live.
Well, Memo Live is right across from the
Workshop.
Special Shows Council, so we've got 2 things going on.
Put the link in the chat. Link in chat.
It is.
Link in chat.
It's in there. Posted it
I
earlier.
don't
I'll
see
post
it.
again.
Post it again right now. I'll click it. I will. Put it in there. Clickety click.
I don't see it in this chat.
You put it in the chat.
We should do more schedule conflict resolution. We could have done one of them at 8.
It's in the chat. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.